Over about 15 years, this guy named Paul wrote 13 letters. And these weren't formal documents. They were just personal notes to people he really cared about, people who were confused and fighting and kind of losing their way. And somehow, this small collection of letters became one of the most influential writings in all of human history. So how on earth did that happen? Well, let's dive in and find out. But first, let me ask you a quick question. Imagine you got your hands on someone's entire email history, like everything, and your goal was to piece together their life story from it. How would you organize all those emails? You'd sort it by date, right? Of course you would, because that's how its story unfolds chronologically. I mean, can you imagine sorting it by word count, from longest to shortest? You'd lose everything, all the context, the drama, the ups and downs of their journey. It would just be a jumbled, meaningless mess of messages. Well, here's the crazy part. That's exactly how Paul's letters are arranged in the New Testament. Not by date, but by length. From the longest one, Romans, all the way down to the shortest. But when you put them back in the order they were actually written, something amazing happens. A powerful, deeply human story emerges. You see, the arc of a man's life. And that is exactly what we're going to do right now. Okay, so we're going to uncover this hidden story. First, let's lay out the map for this journey and walk through Paul's letters the way he actually wrote them. So here it is. This is Paul's entire writing career on a single timeline. It spans about 15 years, and you can see the whole progression, from his very first letters all the way to his last, which he wrote from a Roman dungeon. This is the story we're about to walk through. All right, let's jump in at the very beginning with his earliest letters. These were written to brand new, fragile churches that were already facing their very first major crises. Paul's first surviving letter that we have, Galatians, is just white hot with anger. I mean, you can feel it coming off the page. And you have to understand why. Paul had literally just been stoned and left for dead planting these churches. And now, almost immediately, other teachers are sneaking in behind him and telling these new believers, hey, faith in Jesus isn't quite enough. You also have to follow all these old Jewish ceremonial laws to really be accepted by God. And Paul's response is just explosive. He doesn't even say hello. He skips all the usual pleasantries and just dives right in. This letter really becomes the foundation of his core argument for the rest of his life. A person is made right with God, what he calls being justified, only by faith in what Christ did for them, not by their own religious performance. It's a free gift, period. Then, just a couple years later, his tone shifts completely. He writes to the church in Thessalonica, and this one is so different. It's warm, it's pastoral. You can tell he loves these people. Now, he'd only been with them for about a month before getting chased out of town, and they were really struggling with two big questions. First, they were terrified about what happens to believers who die before Jesus returns. Did they miss out? And second, they were thinking, well, if Jesus is coming back any day now, why should we even bother working? In fact, some of them had just quit their jobs to sit around and wait. So Paul, like a good pastor, offers both comfort and correction. To that first fear, he gives this incredible, profound hope. He tells them, don't worry. The believers who have died are actually first in line for the resurrection. But to the second problem, he lays down some very practical, no-nonsense advice. Basically, if anyone won't work, they shouldn't eat. He's making it clear that faith doesn't cancel out personal responsibility. Hope isn't about being passive. Okay, moving on in his journey, Paul starts to engage with these major urban centers. First up, he has to tackle the absolute moral chaos happening in the church in Corinth. And then, after that, he'll lay out his core theology for the believers in the capital of the world, Rome. So if Galatians was a fight for the right beliefs, 1 Corinthians was a fight for just basic human decency. Seriously, the church in Corinth was a total mess. I mean, look at this list. They were divided into factions, literally suing each other in pagan courts. There was blatant sexual immorality. People were getting drunk at communion. And what's worse, they were actually kind of proud of how tolerant they were about it all. But right in the middle of addressing all this chaos, Paul just hits pause. He tells this bickering, fractured church that, look, you can have faith that moves mountains, you can have every spiritual gift imaginable, but if you don't have love, you are nothing. It's all meaningless. It's just noise. All volume, no music. Now, by the time he writes his second letter to them, 2 Corinthians, Paul himself has come under personal attack. People are challenging his authority. So when these opponents demand his credentials, he does something incredible. He defends himself not with the resume of his successes, but with a resume of his suffering, a list of his scars. He talks about being beaten, shipwrecked, going without sleep. And his conclusion is this radical idea that God's power isn't shown in our strength, it's actually made perfect in our weakness. So after dealing with all that chaos in Corinth, Paul finally sits down to write his masterpiece. It's a letter to the church in Rome, a church, by the way, he's never even visited. This letter, Romans, is his most complete and systematic explanation of the gospel, and it follows this really clear, powerful three-step logic. Step 1, the problem. Everyone has sinned, everyone falls short, doesn't matter if you're religious or not. Step 2, the solution. We are justified or made right with God totally freely by His grace. It's a gift. And step 3, the result. We get peace with God and the power to live a completely transformed life. Paul does eventually get to Rome, but definitely not how he planned. He arrives as a prisoner, in chains. And it's from there, under house arrest, literally chained to a Roman guard 24/7, that he writes 4 absolutely incredible letters. And each of these 4 prison epistles shows us a totally different side of Paul's thinking. In Ephesians, he zooms way out to show us God's huge, cosmic plan for unity in Christ. In Philippians, which is amazing, he writes about joy from a prison cell. In Colossians, he focuses on the absolute supremacy of Christ over everything. And then there's Philemon, which is maybe the most personal letter of them all. Yeah, Philemon, it's this short little letter to a slave owner named, well, Philemon, and it's about his runaway slave, a man named Onesimus, who somehow found Paul in Rome and became a Christian. So Paul sends Onesimus back with this letter, and he begs Philemon to receive him back not as a piece of property, but as a beloved brother. And then he drops this incredible line. He says, if he has wronged you or owes you anything, put that on my account. Do you see what he's doing? Paul isn't just preaching the gospel, he's living it out right there on the page. Now, history tells us Paul was eventually released from that first imprisonment, but his freedom didn't last long. He gets arrested again, this time during the horrific persecution under the Emperor Nero. And this time, Paul knows this is the end. He knows he's not getting out. And from that final cell, he writes his last letters to 2 young pastors he had mentored. And let me be clear, this time it's not a comfortable house arrest. This is a cold, dark Roman dungeon. Tradition holds that it was the Mamertine prison, basically an underground stone chamber where they lowered prisoners down through a hole in the ceiling, often to just leave them there to die. And the emotional weight of his final letter to Timothy is it's heavy. You can feel his loneliness. Most of his friends are gone. Some he sent away on missions, sure, but others just flat out abandoned him when things got tough. He writes to his dear friend Timothy, "Only Luke is with me." And it's from that cold, lonely place that he writes what is essentially his own epitaph. And notice what he says. He doesn't claim to be perfect. He doesn't say he won every single battle or ran a flawless race. Not at all. He just says, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I've kept the faith. And that's the whole point, isn't it? The goal isn't flawlessness. The goal is faithfulness. So, when you lay out Paul's life like this, when you read his story chronologically, what are the big takeaways for us? I think there are 3 huge ones. First, the gospel meets you right in the middle of your mess. It's not for people who have it all together. Second, suffering is not a sign that God has abandoned you. For Paul, it was the primary place where God's power showed up. And third, you don't have to finish strong, you just have to finish faithful. Because in the end, this is the one unshakable conviction that fueled Paul's entire crazy journey from that first angry letter to the Galatians all the way to his final words from a dungeon. It's the one single message that echoes through all 13 letters, the thread that ties his whole story together. And it's this, that absolutely nothing, not death, not life, not anything in all of creation, can ever separate us from the love of God.